Think for yourself. Question authority.
What's up, guys? Now, many of you may have assumed I was going to be doing a video on this topic because there's lots of information that has been going back and forth between Bloomberg, Nintendo. Now we have patents that are involved with 4K, all about this 4K Nintendo Switch as supposedly coming soon in development. But there's some confusing information out there about how it's being reported, especially with these patents. So let's take a look at that closely in this video. And if you do enjoy this, hit the like button for me and share the video out. So this whole situation with this 4K Switch has been going back and forth for quite a long time now. Bloomberg saying it's coming, Nintendo saying it's not coming, like directly, just flat out. And then them promoting their OLED Switch that's coming out next week. You have the OLED Switch out there in the wild already before its release date. And then you have these patents talking about Nintendo working on AI upscaling for higher resolutions for a most likely next-gen Switch. Now, as we know, the Switch Pro, thing is probably not happening because of Nintendo's own words. Doug Bowser, like we talked about in a video in the past, came out recently and said that, asking in the interview, what would you rather have, a modest upgrade, or would you like to have a full next generation experience that changes the way you play? And then, sure enough, right after that, they announced the Switch OLED, which was just a screen upgrade, and that was it. So we got the answer right then and there from Nintendo. There is no Switch Pro. This is going to be a next-gen Switch. However, the whole next-gen, and generational thing is debatable on what that even is these days. Like the PlayStation 5, I talked about this on Nintendo Prime's podcast a few days ago. The PlayStation 5 currently is more like a PS4 Pro. So it's basically playing a lot of cross-gen games still, and the upgrade is not like amazingly substantial, and a lot of these games still run on PlayStation 4. So a next-gen Switch, yeah, it's probably going to have some exclusive games which would allow it to continue on its lifespan for quite a long time, but even if they release a next-gen Switch in 2022, that doesn't mean there's not going to be a bunch of cross-gen games still coming to the original Switch platform for a few years, you see? So there's going to be a time period where there's games that are intersecting between both platforms. I don't think anybody needs to worry about it being a next-gen Switch. I think the Switch Pro aspect and model of that being the thing is not happening. Now, before we talk about this whole 4K patent thing, let's briefly talk about Mochizuki and Bloomberg. Now, Mochizuki, I think, has gone off in the wrong direction here. I think he's not reporting things correctly, he's not reporting things very smartly, and he's doing a disservice to his people that view his content. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, he posted that article about Nintendo releasing a 4K Switch in 2022, just 1 week before Nintendo was going to release the Switch OLED. And in the article, he had some, not so highly respectable things to say about the Switch OLED in terms of its lack of capabilities and being not much of an upgrade. And then he went on to say and doubled down that, hey, I have 11 developers, and then naming a developer by name in the article, saying that they have development kits for this 4K Switch or 4K development kits, and it's coming, and he was, adamant about it and doubling down on it. And then, of course, Nintendo came out and directly denied it. Pretty much the same day, I think a few hours later, they denied that whole thing, basically throwing him under the bus. So the problem I have with Mochizuki right now, which is I'm probably not going to, like I said, cover his information anymore. This is not really me covering his information. It's more about the situation that was involved there. But that was very unprofessional reporting on his part, and I'll tell you why. He's supposed to be a tech reporter. Now remember that. He's supposed to be a tech reporter for Bloomberg. All he said in his article was that developers were sent out 4K Switch dev kits. Now, in my point of view, that is very vague and not really, enough information to go by. He didn't explain what these dev kits were doing. He didn't explain that this was 4K upscaling. He didn't explain that this was, games targeting 1080p and being upscaled to 4K. He didn't say if this was native 4K. He didn't describe anything about it. He just says 4K Switch dev kits. So of course, it's very easy to discredit that information. If you're a developer or if you're Nintendo yourself, you can just flat out say there are no 4K Switch dev kits because, quite frankly, there isn't any, right? There's no 4K Nintendo Switch. There's no such thing. Like, if you're referring to the current Switch model, there are no 4K Switch dev kits out there. That makes sense, right? Now, for a Super Switch or a Switch 2 or a next-gen Switch or whatever they call it, of course, there's probably going to be dev kits that can output to 4K. Now, they're not going to be rendering games at 4K native, right? Unless maybe they're indie games. But even the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X has trouble outputting games at native 4K, even just at 30 frames per second. They have all these options to have performance modes engaged or 1440p and, you know, upscaling and things like that, even for these next-gen consoles that are 10 times more powerful, 20 times more powerful, whatever it is, than the current Nintendo Switch, right? So there is no way that there's any 4K dev kits for the Switch out there in the first place. So the entire article was worded incorrectly and was very badly done, in my opinion. If you're a tech reporter, you should be able to explain at least what you mean by 4K dev kits. If you can't even do that, then just don't report this information. Just leave it alone. Let Nintendo announce this console when they're ready. So with that out of the way, though, of course, when Nintendo denied that information, the same day, Nintendo themselves made public this AI upscaling resolution patent on September 30th, which was highlighting some information about how Nintendo was working on upscaling resolutions from like 540p to 1080p and things like that. So that was kind of interesting that they did that. And now you can take this in many different ways, and of course many people did already, because of just by seeing the patent, you know, people jumped to the conclusion like, oh, you know, Nintendo's working on AI upscaling for a 4K Switch and it's coming, you know, and all these things are true. And that may very well be true in a certain way. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they actually are working on what this patent says. And we'll discuss why here. And that is because if you look at the filing date of that patent and when work stopped on the patent, you'll come to realize that Nintendo hasn't really been working on, as far as patents are concerned, this type of technology for quite a while, back in 2020 even. So this patent was filed in March of 2020, and then it was up for review as of May of 2020, and it hasn't been touched since. It hasn't been granted, it hasn't been approved yet. And there's some interesting things that I need to bring out about that as to why that may be the case and why it's potentially still good news either way, right? And the reason is because, and I talked about this just in August, actually, in one of my streams. What do you think about next Switch and NVIDIA DLSS? Well, the technology doesn't exist yet for mobile to use DLSS. So, like the Steam Deck doesn't use DLSS. They just need to get a certain level of... they can actually use AMD's super resolution. That works on NVIDIA cards. It works on any card, actually. That's not older than a 970. Maybe easier to use that than DLSS. It doesn't take any like extra overhead. That's my thought. DLSS isn't a must to get better picture quality. That's why I was a little iffy on that rumor in the first place about... I never even talked about it really on my channel, because it seemed kind of far-fetched that they was going to be using DLSS in a mobile device. They don't have it. They just don't have it on any chip. Doesn't exist. Something doesn't exist in the real world. It's hard to believe it. As far as like technology is concerned, there's no mobile chip out there that uses DLSS that I'm aware of. If there is one, let me know.
You're approaching the Dark Lord Sanctum.
What a lot of people don't understand is that it's easier technically on developers to use FSR than it is DLSS, which is something also Mochizuki did not talk about in his reports, because maybe he doesn't know. Like I said, tech reporter, hello, right? But also these guys who have rumored this DLSS Nintendo Switch for 2021, I don't think they knew about this either, because NVIDIA's Orin technology, their chip, their Lovelace, GPU architecture, wasn't going to be ready to be released until the end of 2022 or so, according to their latest convention they had back in early 2021, NVIDIA announced that their Lovelace or Orin, SoC that what they were making wasn't going to be ready till the end of next year. So any Nintendo Switch, next gen Switch that was going to be released in 2021 was not going to be using DLSS. Okay, so that was like pretty much a given right there. And that's why I was waiting to see like what on earth were these guys talking about with this rumored Switch for 2021. Didn't make any sense to use DLSS if there was going to be that. There's probably going to be a different console altogether, or a different chip, not even related to it. And now that we see that AMD has a easy solution to use for everybody, which is really cool. I think even Intel graphics cards can use FSR as well. You got Intel, AMD, NVIDIA can all use FSR to improve image quality no matter what you're using. So you got 1080p image, 720p image, you can output it to 1440p and then upres it to 4K using FSR, maybe on the ultra quality setting, and you have an image that looks pretty respectable on a 4K TV, a lot better than it would at native 720p basically. Now, why would Nintendo stop this patent from continuing forward and then making it public? Well, the answer is simple. They simply just didn't withdraw their application. They left it out there, and here it is going public on September 30th with nothing really being done on it since May of 2020. That's quite a long time of inactivity on that patent. Simply making it public for people to see doesn't necessarily mean they're still working on it. It just means that you can see it now. And there's a very clear explanation by Jay's 2 Cents, who is a highly respected YouTuber who does tech teardowns and things like that. He's very much like Gamers Nexus, Linus Tech Tips. We got Gamers Nexus, Jay's 2 Cents, and Linus. Those are the three main go-to guys a lot of people listen to for tech-related stuff. He did a very clear and simple explanation of why FSR is easier to use than DLSS, and I'll link that video in the description. So basically though, DLSS is a game-per-game basis. It takes developers time to implement DLSS in game development. And the reason why that patent also confirms that Nintendo wasn't even using or working with DLSS in the first place is because DLSS is already a patented technology by NVIDIA. Why would they need to be patenting their own custom AI upscaling if they're already just going to be using NVIDIA's DLSS, right? It wouldn't make any sense. So that pretty much confirmed it right there. Nintendo wasn't working with DLSS. They were trying to use something customized on their own. Most likely they wouldn't have to pay NVIDIA the licensing and all the money involved with paying to use DLSS on each and every game for a next generation Switch. Now you have FSR coming out, and even FSR 2.0, which AMD promises to be even better quality and better performance to be used in games and all different GPUs than FSR 1.0, which is what they just released a few months ago. So them making it public right now, that patent, doesn't really mean they're working with that same technology right now for this next generation Switch. What it could mean though is that they're done with that. They're not going to use it anymore, and just maybe they're going to adopt something from AMD like FSR to use in their next gen Switch because it's extremely easy and they can simply implement it on every dev kit or every software development kit, SDK, and just have a simple process where developers flip a switch, just like what Jay's 2 Cents says in his video. I want you to take a look at it if you have time. Basically, flip a switch and you have FSR upscaling to 4K on your game or whatever you're using as a developer. It's not the same with DLSS. DLSS, you need to have actual more work and more time and development time to be put into it to make it work for each and every game on a case-by-case basis. And that's why you have certain games that use DLSS 2.0 even that look better quality than others because their implementation by the developer, they spent more time on it, they put more effort into it. Each one is different, but with FSR, each game is going to be pretty much the same type of quality because it's the same FSR being used on each game. Basically, it's a open source software that everybody can use. So that's exactly the kind of thing Nintendo, as you would imagine, would be looking for. They'd be looking for a solution that would be something they could just implement for everything on every development kit, no problem. And by looking at that patent, it looked very complicated, like all the things they're trying to do. and then probably say, hey, wait a second, AMD has this FSR, we can just put it on to every dev kit for our next gen Switch and be done. Hey, that's great. That's something that sounds more like Nintendo, right? An easy solution, but still looks great to use for everybody. Usually these things are very simple to explain if you look at the whole grand scheme of things. You got a patent released, made public. The patent was filed back in March of 2020, and it was still not granted as of May of 2020, and nothing else has changed since. And I'll leave the links to that all in the description. So this information doesn't mean that a 4K Switch is not coming. Basically just means that Nintendo most likely changed the direction they're going and how they're going to implement the 4K upscaling on this next generation Switch, you see? So either way, I think this new console is coming probably next year. I'm just putting out the information for you guys so you can understand clearly what is most likely really going on here based on the information and the facts from the filing of the patent to when work stopped on the patent to when they made it public, and to also the other technologies that are easier to use to implement for 4K upscaling like FSR. And like I said before in a previous video, we don't really need at this point somebody from Bloomberg to tell us that a next generation Switch is coming. You just know it's coming from Nintendo's track record. Obviously, we've seen proof of it already. We know they're working with upscaling technology just by their past experiences here with the patents, and now with new technologies coming out. We also know that Steam Deck doesn't use DLSS. It's an AMD based, console, so it's going to be using the FSR. And also we know that there is 4K output being displayed on Nintendo's own firmware updates for the Switch itself earlier in 2021. So we already know this next gen Switch is coming. We can't force Nintendo to announce it. We thought it was coming out in 2020, 2021, whatever. We can't force anything from Nintendo. The only thing I can do as a content creator is produce as much real information for you to look at as possible, which is exactly what I did. I was providing real information showing the development progress behind the scenes of this new console, and it looks like everything is basically coming true, right, behind the scenes, but we just have to see the actual product itself announced by Nintendo. And remember, for a mobile device, next gen console, next gen Switch, Switch 2, whatever it is, for a mobile device, the year aspect means a lot less. Like when you have an iPad or iPhone or Samsung Galaxy, they have yearly releases. They have their next gen model every single year. That's expected. So for a mobile device, for a Switch, having a next gen console from what many people thought to be in 2020, that wasn't going to be surprising even back then because of the type of console the Switch is. Either way, we had a global pandemic, and due to that, now we have chip supply shortages throughout the entire world. So it is what it is, but something definitely is going on with Nintendo and them working with brand new technologies that are probably going to be released very, very soon for a next gen Switch. That's just the way things go in gaming, and it's about time anyway, right? Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.